HS Yom HaShoah
Hello, everyone. It's an emotional honor to address you today in this unique way on Yom HaShoah, when we remember the 6 million Jews murdered, tortured, and gassed in the Holocaust. So bear with me. The theme that was chosen for our high school this year is Children in the Holocaust. This is always a poignant and emotional subject when teachers and educators are tasked with teaching and exploring this subject, all the while looking into the young, hopeful faces of their students. Over 1 million of the 6 million Jews brutally murdered and killed were just children. Janusz Polczak, a teacher who devoted his life to the care and education of children, who ran an orphanage in ghetto Warsaw and walked with his children into the gas chambers, even though he could have been saved, said, "Children are not the people of tomorrow, but are people of today. They have a right to be taken seriously and to be treated with tenderness and respect. They should be allowed to grow into whoever they were meant to be. The unknown person inside of them is our hope for the future." These children were not allowed to grow into who they were meant to be. How many poems were left unwritten by future poets? How many buildings were left unbuilt by future architects and engineers? How many medical breakthroughs undeveloped? How many musical concertos uncomposed? It wasn't just the children that the Nazis murdered, but so much hope for a better world. We will never know what the world lost, what it could have been, if not for the loss of all those precious lives. Adults, as parents, it's impossible to even imagine. The pain of the mother whose child is torn out of her arms. The suffering of the father who watched his child slowly turn to a skeleton as they starve to death. The courage needed to lead your child gently by the hand into the gas chambers, calmly, so as not to frighten them, even though they're walking to certain death. On this day, we remember. We remember them all. We carve their memories in our minds and in our hearts. The Jewish way is yizkor, to remember, to look back in remembrance and to look forward in hope. With that, I'd like to share 2 short stories with you. After the Second World War and the end of the Holocaust, Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Kahneman traveled throughout Europe searching for Jewish children that had been left for safekeeping in convents and orphanages. These children had lost their families in the Holocaust, and he was determined to find as many as possible and place them in Jewish homes. When he came upon one particular orphanage, the headmaster told him that he wouldn't find any Jews there, and if there were, he would need proof of their Jewish identity. Rabbi Kahneman asked for permission to see the children. The headmaster allowed him to enter, knowing that the children would have no recollection of their Jewish roots after so many years of separation. In order to make matters more difficult, Rabbi Kahneman was told that he would only have a few minutes to try to pinpoint the Jewish children. The rabbi thought to himself, how will I be able, in such few minutes, to know which children are Jewish? The rabbi walked into the sleeping quarters of the children and suddenly cried out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Suddenly, from throughout the room, certain children started stirring and sitting up in their beds. Cries of, Mama, Tati, could be heard as the children remembered the familiar prayer their parents instilled in them years before. One by one, Rabbi Kahneman was able to pick out the Jewish children. Imagine those mothers who had sat with these children before going to sleep each night, teaching them those precious words that later enabled them to return to their people. Today, on Yom HaShoah, we begin 10 days, Aseret Yemei Tshuah, the 10 days that unfold within them Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, and Yom HaAtzmaut. This is not a mistake in the calendar. There is a flow to these days. Mishoah letkuma, from great destruction, the Holocaust, through the steep price of the lives of Israeli soldiers entrusted with the safety of the Jewish people, wherever they may be in this world, and to the celebration of independence and safe haven that is Israel, the Jewish state. The second story that I want to share with you is a personal one. I had Adi, my daughter, while I was at university doing my master's degree. She was such a tiny little thing that I didn't want to leave her with a babysitter at home, and I asked my professors for permission to bring her to class with me. They agreed, and Adi would join me in my lectures, cooperating by being an amazingly good and quiet baby. One of the classes dealt with Jewish history and its effect on Israel diplomacy in the world. One day, as I'm sitting in class, the professor showed us a documentary about the Holocaust. I remember sitting in that classroom in the dark, holding my beautiful baby girl. As parents, as a mother, we are tasked with the responsibility of keeping our children safe. They cling to us when they're afraid of the dark, when they scratch their knee, when their feelings get hurt, confident in our ability as parents, in my ability as a mother to make everything right, in our invincible power to always keep them safe. Feeling the helplessness of those Jewish parents, tears freely flowing down my cheeks, dropping gently on Adi's soft head, I remember making a silent promise that was so fervent, so insistent in me, that it was like a scream welling up from within. A promise I made myself then, and I make to you and with you today. Leolam lo od, never again.
Was imprisoned in the Lodz ghetto at the age of 17. His testimony tells us about the world of choiceless choices. It brings color to a dilemma that he faced and makes it less abstract for us.
I had a friend who was not Jewish, who lived at the next street called Goplanska. Our street, Dolna, was the last street of the ghetto. We lived almost on the corner of Dolna and Zgerska. And one day when they closed the ghetto, I decided to go across the barbed wire. I took a chance and I discussed it with his mother. Her name was Stanislava Grabowska. And her friend, we used to play soccer in the street. So I told her if she would like to make some money. And how to make some money was by smuggling some food into the ghetto, which was very dangerous for me and for her. I was willing to take the risk because I saw that the family will starve from no food. So we started to smuggle from around June of 1940 until October. To tell you the truth, that my family had more food these few months from June until October of 1940 than we had before the war.
What were the roles of adults in the ghetto as opposed to the roles of children? Why did children become smugglers? And what were the dilemmas that faced the adults who allowed their children to be smugglers?
I thought maybe the war will end in a half a year, you know, optimistic. I was not optimistic, but desperate hopes. I thought maybe it'll end in a year. I will study, and then Poland will be reconstituted. And maybe I passed the exam before. If not, I'll pass the exam again. So I actually studied through the war. So what I used to do, get up early in the morning. I used to have to go, the trucks would come to pick up the Jewish workers, maybe 5 or 6 in the morning. Used to get up at 3, study a couple hours, and then go join the workers and go for about 10 or 12 hour day work. The main problem was, if I couldn't solve a problem mathematically, I didn't have anybody to ask.
Why was Oscar so stubborn about continuing to learn? Does this make him a hero? Does this mean he resisted? What does it say about his belief in the future? What effect did performing forced labor have on these children? What were the other ways in which they were forced to mature? In her testimony, Livia recalls her deportation to Auschwitz with her parents, Rachel and Nathan Wolf. Livia was 16 at the time.
And I shall never forget that when we stopped and we heard that we are getting off, we heard voices outside. My father embraced me and he almost strangled me, kissing me. And he said goodbye. And he said, take care of yourself. He knew that he died. And then, of course, the doors open and we see these scrawny, like scarecrows, like jailbirds, like insane people with those stripes, you know. And then those huge dogs and officers. It was night. And then I see myself separated from my mother. I was on one side and she was with her sisters on the other. So again, without thinking, without anything, I ran to her. And Mengele came and gave me one whack on my head. I fell, but he looked at me and he went back. He left me there.
What happened to children when they were torn away from their families and separated from their support systems? Why was the moment of separation seared into Livia's memory so that years later she remembers exactly what her father said?
At this point, we've asked a number of students to light a candle in memory of either relatives or those who they'll share a little bit about who perished in the Holocaust. I'd like to ask Emily, I'm going to find you and unmute you.
Yeah, hi, good morning, guys. Should I start?
Go for it.
Okay, this isn't a relative of mine, but I'm lighting this candle in honor of Eva and Miriam Kaur, who survived the sadistic pseudoscientific medical experiments carried out on twins at the Auschwitz death camp. Eva dedicated herself decades later to telling of the Holocaust horrors spawned by religious and racial hatred, while preaching the power of forgiveness as a means of healing from devastating trauma. May their memory be forever blessed.
Thank you, Emily. Gav.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of Benjamin Hirsch, who was a child survivor of the Holocaust. His mother sent him and his 4 older siblings on a kinder transport from Germany to Paris in 1938 following Kristallnacht. His parents and younger siblings perished in Auschwitz. After making his way to Atlanta, he became an award-winning architect and served in the U.S. Army. He and his wife, Jacqueline, raised 4 children. Sadly, he passed away in 2018.
Rotem.
I'm lighting this candle in honor of my grandma, Esther Kadosh. She unfortunately died in 2004, and she didn't talk about her experience in the Holocaust much. She was born in Transylvania and had 10 siblings. By the time the militia reached her family in 1944, it was nearing the end of the war. Her community was put in transports to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Our family doesn't know much about what happened there, but she and 4 of her older siblings survived. Their house was taken by their non-Jewish neighbors in their absence. They then went to German displacement camps until 1949 when my grandma moved to Israel. She was 18 at the time, and she met my grandpa, and they had 7 kids, the youngest of whom is my father.
Thank you, Rotem. Eitan.
I'm lighting a candle in memory of Attila Petschauer. Attila, born in Budapest on December 14th, 1904, was not only a Jewish gold medalist Olympic champion in fencing, but also considered to be one of the world's best fencers in the late 1920s and early 1930s. While at a labor camp in 1943, he was singled out due to his fame, publicly humiliated, and subjected to freezing water for an extended period of time. This mistreatment led to his death only a few hours later at the age of 38. In 1985, Attila was posthumously inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, and today we remember him.
Thank you, Eitan. Zach.
So I'm lighting in memory of my great-great-grandparents, Moritz and Berta Plaut. In 1939, shortly after Kristallnacht, my family, that would be my grandfather and his parents and his grandparents, they realized after Kristallnacht it was time to leave Germany. Their shul had been burned, and my grandfather's grandfather had been badly injured. And Moritz and Berta Plaut basically sacrificed all of their belongings to get visas for the rest of my family. And ultimately, they paid the ultimate sacrifice. My great-great-grandfather was killed in Dachau, and my great-great-grandmother was killed in the Riga ghetto in Latvia. May that memory be a blessing.
And finally, Sila.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of Margit Buchater Feldman. Margit was born in 1929 in Hungary. She was shipped at the age of 15 along with her parents to a Nazi death camp where her parents died immediately. After lying about her age to avoid gas chambers, she was sent to multiple camps and was liberated at the age of 16. After moving to the US, she got married and had 2 children and became a grandmother to 3. She was hesitant to share her story, but when she agreed to share her story for a student's project, she learned the importance of sharing her story and committed her life to telling it. She eventually wrote a book and was the subject of a documentary. Margit died 75 years after being liberated and just shy of her 91st birthday after contracting coronavirus.
Thank you, Sila. I'm going to ask everyone to please stand up now. We're going to say, Rabbi E is going to say the Kalmale, the memorial prayer for all of the martyrs of the Holocaust, following which we'll sing together Hatikva. I'm going to do a screen share so that you can follow along. But if you, I don't know how you're looking at it on your screen, but if you, there's a way that once I share the screen, you can drag the little bar to the middle so you're able to see what's on the screen as well as see Rabbi E and whoever is talking. So I'm going to share it now so you can follow along. And 1 second, and then we will go ahead, Rabbi E.
El Moli Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamtzeim Nuchonachona Al Kanfei Hashchina B'Malos Kedoshim U'Tehorim Kezohar HaRekia Mazirin Es Nishmos HaKadoshim VaTehorim Shehumsu V'Shenehergu V'Shenishchatu V'Shenisrafu V'Shenitba'u V'Shenechneku Al Kiddush Hashem Shabli Neder Etain Tzedakah B'Ad Haskaras Nishmoseihem B'Gan Eden Tehenim Yastirein B'Seser K'nofav L'Olamim Yitzror B'Yisrael HaChayim Es Nishmoseihem Adonai Hu Nachalasam V'Yanuchu B'Shalom Al Mishkaboseihem V'Nomar Amen.
Amen. Veronica, please remain standing. We're going to sing Hatikva, but before we do, I'm going to ask Muratali to explain just for a moment what you're going to see on the screen in a second.
So we're actually going to see footage, real footage of Bergen-Belsen right after it was liberated. And what you'll notice when they're singing Hatikva is that the second verse, the words are a little different. And the reason why it's different is it's because it's pre-Israel, before Kom Hamdina. And therefore, after the state of Israel was founded, the words changed a little bit. So if you can please follow along.
The day I reached Belsen concentration camp, the 5th day of liberation, was a Friday, the day before the Jewish Sabbath. Something like half the surviving prisoners at Belsen were Jews, and the Jewish chaplain to the British Second Army, the Reverend L.H. Hardman, held an eve of the Sabbath service in the open air in the midst of the camp. It was the first Jewish service that many of the men and women present had taken part in for 6 years. It was probably the first Jewish service held on German soil in absolute security and without fear for a decade. Around us lay the corpses that there had not been time to clear away even after 5 days. 40,000 or more had been cleared, but there were still 1,000 or 2,000 around. And people were still lying down and dying in broad daylight in front of our eyes. This was the background to this open-air Jewish service. During the service, the few hundred people gathered together were sobbing openly, with joy at their liberation, and with sorrow at the memory of their parents and brothers and sisters that had been taken from them and gassed and burned. These people knew they were being recorded. They wanted the world to hear their voice. They made a tremendous effort which quite exhausted them. Listen.
Before we finish, and everyone could sit. Before we finish today, I just wanted to thank the students who are involved in today's program. I want to thank Mora Tali. I want to thank Mora Elon. I want to thank Mora Galia. I want to thank Rabbi Estreicher and everyone who was involved in putting together this morning's ceremony. And I want to remind everyone that this afternoon at 2:10, we're going to get together in smaller groups. We've sent you your groups. There's an email that's going to go out today at 2 o'clock in case you don't have to look for the email that has in it the links and the places that you're supposed to go. And I encourage you to look at the email we sent you last night and to look at some of the material when you have some time to use the day, not just when we're together like this, or not just when we're together at the end of the day, but to use the day to read, to watch, and to learn more about both the Shoah in general, but specifically about the individuals, to learn about the children, the names, the people behind the names, the people behind the numbers. Really, that is our job today, in their memory and in their honor. And I want to also encourage you, as we sent out in the email yesterday, the beautiful project that the teachers put together, the Butterfly Project. So please, if you haven't seen it already, to look at it and to please take part. I think it's a beautiful way to honor the memory of the 1.5 million children who we lost during the Shoah. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Those who are joining us from families, etc., from outside, please thank you for joining us, and have a meaningful day.